Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's information session for BC mortgage brokers who are interested in learning about the new Mortgage Services Act and BCFSA's implementation approach. My name is Kayla Hepworth, and I'm part of the engagement team here at BCFSA, and I'll get us started and situated with some pointers about the format of this Zoom webinar session. Today's webinar is scheduled for 1 hour. Your microphones have been muted and you are in listen-only mode. Similarly, you will not be on camera as your video is off. If you would like to turn on captions, click on the Show Captions button at the bottom of your screen. If it's not there, click on the More button and then on the Captions button. You are welcome to use the chat function to send a question or note to the panelists. Only panelists will be able to see these messages. We'll be compiling questions from the chat to update our frequently asked questions document we currently have on our MSA webpage. The Q&A function has been disabled. At the end of the session, we will be answering your questions that were submitted during registration. Thank you very much for taking the time to submit those questions. Although we won't be able to answer all of them at the end, we have designed this presentation based on your questions and will be providing answers to them throughout this session. Finally, we'll be recording today's session and it will be available on our website as soon as possible. I would like to begin by acknowledging the relationship of the First Nations to all the lands that we are on today, as stewards of these lands for many generations, and whose deep connections with this land continue to this day. Today, I am speaking to you from the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. As a reflection of the provincial scope of our organization, we recognize that BCFSA and all of its regulated entities occupy territories of nations across British Columbia. We honor and respect the knowledge keepers and are committed to strengthening our relationship with Indigenous peoples. While we meet today on a virtual platform in different locations, I encourage you to take a moment to reflect and acknowledge the traditional territory you are calling in from. I would like to quickly preview what we'll be covering in today's session. To start, Tolga Yalkin, BCFSA's CEO and Chief Statutory Officer, will join us to set the stage for the new MSA. After, we will give an overview of the legislative framework and BCFSA's role. We will then go through the 15-month phased approach of implementation, where we are right now, touching on each milestone and what's coming. Then we'll discuss the availability of resources, how they can be accessed, when they'll be available, and where to find them. After that, we'll go through how our education team is responding to the requirements for the mortgage services industry and the big changes, and the principal broker and the mortgage broker courses. We will then have an FAQ section where we took the most common questions you submitted during registration and we'll provide answers. And then we'll conclude with resources and how to contact us. Let's get started. I'd like to introduce you to today's speakers. First, we'll hear from Tolga Yalkin, BCFSA CEO and Chief Statutory Officer. Then we'll hear from Jessica Finnerty, Director of Regulatory Transformation. Then Kate Bilney, Manager of Communications. And then Caroline Allen, BCFSA's Director of Education and Practice Standards. Thank you. And with that, I'll now hand you over to our first speaker, Tolga.
Thanks, Kayla, and thank you all for joining this information session today. I hope you'll find it informative and helpful as you begin to prepare yourself and your business for the new regulatory framework under the Mortgage Services Act. As many of you know, British Columbia is entering a new era in mortgage services regulation. The Mortgage Services Act, or MSA for short, which will come into force on October 13th, 2026, marks the most substantial update to our regulatory framework in over 50 years. This legislation replaces the outdated Mortgage Brokers Act, aligning our standards with today's complex, fast-paced mortgage market, and also introduces enhancements to practice standards that provide more safeguards for consumers. Today's mortgage broker landscape is larger, more layered, and operates at a much faster pace. Products have become more complex, the number of service providers has grown, and of course, the stakes for consumers are much higher. The mortgage landscape has evolved dramatically in the more than 50 years since the Mortgage Brokers Act was enacted. That's why this change is so important. We now see more actors, more sophisticated products, and greater risks, especially as mortgage sizes have outpaced income growth. The MSA introduces clearer licensing categories, stronger consumer protections, and enhanced oversight powers for BCFSA. It also responds directly to recommendations from the Cullen Commission and the Expert Panel on Money Laundering, which called for reforms of mortgage broker regulation to strengthen consumer protection. We're confident this framework will significantly enhance consumer protection and benefit industry as a whole, but we also acknowledge that this is a significant change for the mortgage services industry. That's why our focus has been on practical rollout, engaging with industry, establishing a technical working group, and developing the education and resources that we know industry members need to understand how the new framework lands in practice. This isn't change for change's sake. It's a fundamental shift in practice, one that brings us into alignment with the modern mortgage environment and better protects consumers. Consumer protection is not just a regulatory checkbox, it's a shared ethical commitment. By working together, BCFSA as regulator and brokers as professionals, we can build a stronger, safer, and more transparent mortgage industry. This transition is an opportunity, I would say, to elevate standards for the mortgage broker industry to better serve British Columbians. Mortgage brokers and brokerages are going to be confronted with critical decisions to be made about their business models in the new world. And BCFSA will support by providing you with the information that is necessary to inform those decisions. That means plain language, practical guidance, targeted education, and collaboration with other regulators when it makes sense. Today's information session will provide you with key insights into what to expect over the coming months as we prepare for the MSA to take effect. BCFSA is committed to supporting you throughout this transition, and you'll soon hear more about the specific ways we'll be doing so. However, the responsibility for making decisions about your business and implementing the necessary measures to comply with the new MSA requirements ultimately rests with you. Our goal is to make expectations clear, workable, and align with the realities of your day-to-day practice. This is a shared journey. Together, we can build a regulatory environment that strengthens public trust, supports professional excellence, and ensures that mortgage services in BC remain safe, fair, and transparent. Once again, thank you for joining us today, and I hope you find the information shared during this session useful and informative. And with that, I'll hand it over to Jessica.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you, Tolga. My name is Jessica Finnerty, and I'm the Director of Regulatory Transformation at BCFSA. I see a couple people in the chat are just indicating that they're having some trouble with the audio, but there's just one or two people. And so if you're having trouble, suggest that you might want to try logging out and logging back in, because for the most part, I think that the audio is coming through clearly. So I'll start by saying that it's encouraging to see so many of you here to learn more about the MSA and its implementation. And I thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to attend this afternoon's session. So we are here at a pivotal moment for the mortgage broker segment, and it's one that marks a significant step forward in terms of how the industry is regulated and how it serves the public. The MSA represents transformative change. It sets out a modern regulatory framework that strengthens oversight, enhances accountability, and aligns the regulation of the segment with the realities of today's financial services landscape. At the core, this new legislation is designed to do more than just update the rules. It really aims at enhancing consumer protection and building trust in the industry. It enhances consumer confidence by promoting greater transparency, professional standards, and consistency across the mortgage brokering landscape. For mortgage professionals, the MSA will introduce clearer expectations and greater responsibilities. For consumers, it means increased assurance that the individuals and the businesses that they engage with are operating under strong and enforceable standards. So today's session is going to begin with a brief high-level overview of the Mortgage Services Act. I'll start by providing some background to help contextualize why some of these changes are taking place, and then I'll highlight some of the key changes introduced in the new regulatory framework. The main focus of today's session, however, is to give you a clear sense of the pathway to implementation, including the key events and milestones between now and when the new act comes into force on October 13th, 2026. So what we are not going to do today is a deep dive into the new regulatory requirements. That level of detail is going to be covered in the upcoming transition education sessions, and those are mandatory for anyone who wishes to transition their mortgage broker registration to a license under the MSA. So what we are going to do today is walk through the education pathways for industry participants, and we'll give you an overview of the planned training and resources to ensure that all of our mortgage broker registrants are well equipped to understand the new requirements and how they apply to their work. So the purpose of today is really to provide information rather than education, and it's an opportunity to highlight the key elements of the MSA and to answer some of your questions about what comes next, and we'll be able to share with you how you'll be supported to understand the new requirements and when those resources will come available. I know you likely have significant questions about the new requirements under the MSA, and BCFSA will be providing education and resources to help you understand those. And mortgage brokers will then be responsible for taking the education and the resources and making business decisions to come into compliance with the new framework. So if we can go to the next slide, please. As a professional working within this segment, whether you're a designated individual or a mortgage broker, we all share a responsibility for fostering the confidence of consumers. The MSA isn't about just setting new rules. It's about a shared expectation to raise the standard of practice across the board. So to give you a sense of the roles and responsibilities with respect to mortgage brokering and mortgage broker regulation, if we can just go to the next slide, the Ministry of Finance was primarily responsible for developing and approving the mortgage broker legislation, the regulations, the initial set of rules, and the fee schedule. BCFSA is a crown corporation of the BC government, and it's directly responsible for administering the Mortgage Brokers Act and will be responsible for administering the MSA once it comes into force. As an organization, we play a central role also in supporting you and individuals and brokerages throughout the transition journey. So we are responsible for registration and licensing. We will provide both pre-licensing and continuing education to help meet the regulatory requirements. And to support you during the transition, we've developed and will continue to expand a range of resources and guidance materials. As the regulator, we also oversee compliance and enforcement to ensure the integrity of this sector. And in future state, the superintendent of mortgage services will have the authority and the responsibility to make new rules to respond to emerging risks and trends. And that rule-making authority is subject to some prescribed consultation requirements and approval of the Minister of Finance. So one of the questions you might be asking is, why are we doing this, and why is there a need for more or different rules? And the primary driver behind these changes is consumer trust and confidence in the mortgage broker segment. It's trust that they are receiving transparent and ethical advice and that mortgage brokers are acting in their clients' best interest. It's confidence that the professionals in the mortgage brokering industry that individuals are engaging with understand the complexities of the market and can help them navigate increasingly complex mortgage products. And it's assurance that there are effective regulatory mechanisms to address risks and to respond to issues related to compliance. With these changes, the Act also includes key updates to the terminology to better reflect the terminology that is used within the industry, but also with other jurisdictions in Canada. It expands the toolbox of compliance and enforcement tools to ensure that we have the ability to take prompt and proportionate action in cases of non-compliance. The regulator will then have the ability to target policy and education based on the categories of licensing and the services that are offered by the licensees. It's also an opportunity to clarify and expand practice requirements and to align the framework with the one that has been in place for the real estate services segment for many years now. Finally, the MSA is going to, for the regulator, is going to help to streamline some of the processes and procedures to support increased efficiency and effectiveness of compliance, enforcement, and licensing processes. So in the next section, we will help you to understand the various components of the regulatory framework, and I'll highlight some key changes for you. And I'll give you a high-level overview of what the new licensing framework looks like. So the MSA includes significant changes to the regulatory framework, from the approach to licensing right down to the responsibilities of the brokerage, the principal broker, and mortgage brokers. So like I said off the top, we're not going to provide an in-depth overview of the key changes today because those are going to be covered in the transition education that is going to be made available to all mortgage brokers. And transition education is where you will have a better opportunity to understand the scope of changes and what they mean for you. There are overarching changes to the way that the industry will be regulated. We are moving to a superintendent model that mirrors RISA, and that includes the ability for the superintendent to make rules. The enforcement regime has also been updated to expand discipline penalties from the current maximum limit of $50,000 to $250,000 for an individual and $500,000 for a brokerage. And this aligns with the penalties under the Real Estate Services Act and really gives the regulator the ability to take proportionate action in response to serious contraventions where there's a risk to consumers. The framework also introduces an administrative penalty regime, and these are akin to sort of traffic tickets and used to address less serious non-compliance and to intervene into active non-compliance. There will be in future states 6 categories of administrative penalties that include fines that are based on the category and whether it's a first or second offense. One of the most significant features of the new act is the transition from a registration model to a licensing model. Under this model, the role of the designated individual will transition to the role of a principal broker. And the responsibilities of the principal broker in terms of being in active charge of the brokerage are well defined in the mortgage services rules. And I encourage you to review those if you have when you have the opportunity. The framework establishes the categories and levels of licensing, and I'll get into those in a little bit more detail. But then it also supports mortgage brokers to be able to apply for personal mortgage corporations. And then sort of doing a dive down, it also significantly refines, clarifies, and expands responsibilities at all levels. So this includes brokerage responsibilities, principal broker responsibilities, and the responsibilities and obligations of individual mortgage brokers. So there are some very significant changes to some of those requirements. Again, I'm not going to go into those in any detail because they are covered off in depth in the education modules. But at a high level, some of the key changes are related to errors and omissions, insurance requirements for brokerages, record keeping requirements, and the authority for the superintendent to authorize or to approve the operation of a trust account. There are significantly expanded responsibilities for principal brokers to manage the brokerage and to supervise licensees. And for mortgage broker licensees, the new act defines new and enhanced consumer disclosures, clear prescribed duties and obligations to clients, and clear requirements to report misconduct to their principal broker. So looking at the future the future MSA licensing framework under the MBA, the term mortgage broker actually refers to the business entity that's carrying on the business of mortgage brokering. And this can include any and all of dealing, lending, trading, and arranging. The role of the designated individual is actually something that we identify in policy, but it's not referred to in the Act itself. And the term sub-mortgage broker is used to identify individual mortgage brokers who are providing mortgage brokering services. In future state, the business of carrying on, the business that is carrying on the business of is going to be referred to as the mortgage brokerage more appropriately. The designated individual will become the principal broker, and the roles and responsibilities of the principal broker are clearly and well defined in the rules. And the individual that's providing mortgage brokering is referred to as the mortgage broker. So this really, it streamlines the terminology in the legislation with other jurisdiction. And I think more importantly, it really plainly aligns with the terminology that's better understood by both industry members and consumers. In addition to the levels, there are 4 categories of licensing that are introduced. And the purpose of the categories, like I mentioned, is to give BCFSA the ability to target education or specific rules to a category of service. So if we look at the real estate segment, these categories are already well enshrined, and they include trading services, rental property management, and strata management. For mortgage services, those categories in future state are going to include dealing in mortgages, trading in mortgages, administering mortgages, and mortgage lending. So let's pause for a moment on the mortgage lender level versus the mortgage lender license category, because they are distinct, and it's nuanced, but the distinction is important. So I'm going to start with the mortgage lender license level. The mortgage lender license level will not be coming into force on October 13th of 2026. So this refers to any person who is lending money on the security of a real property or buying a debt obligation secured by real property, but not somebody who is considered to be carrying on the business of mortgage lending. So an example could be a private individual who's lending money on the security of a real property one time. The provincial government is really responsible for policy development around the mortgage lender license level, and they continue to explore regulatory approaches for that license level, and they will determine when it comes into force. Once we have more information about the lender license level, we will share that with you. For the foreseeable future, the focus will continue to be on implementing the current framework, and that does not include bringing the license lender level into force. So the lender level is different than the mortgage lender license category, which applies to individuals and brokerages who are carrying on the business of lending. And the lender license category will come into force on October 13th of 2026. So this refers to any person who's carrying on the business of lending money on the security of real property or buying a debt obligation secured by real property, and they must be licensed as a brokerage, a principal broker, or a mortgage broker in the lending category. The lending category then allows brokerages and individuals to deal, trade, and administer their own mortgages. And so an example of this is an investment or a lending company that pools capital from investors to provide mortgage loans to individuals. So there are important nuances between the levels and the categories. What I've offered to you is a high-level overview, and this will be covered in far more detail in the transition education to give you an opportunity to do a deeper dive into understanding the levels and the categories and the services that can be offered for each. And so with that, I will turn it over to Kate to provide us with an overview of the implementation plan and the next 13 to 14 months.
Great, thanks, Jessica. My name is Kate Bilney. I'm the Manager of Communications at BCFSA. So you've heard about what the MSA is, but now let's talk about how we're going to get there. In the lead up to the MSA rules and regulation receiving government approval, BCFSA worked to develop a comprehensive implementation plan to help the mortgage services industry prepare for the new legislation. So today I'm going to walk you through that implementation plan. Spanning 15 months and 3 distinct phases, the implementation plan has been developed to ensure a smooth transition to the MSA. In each phase, we have identified key activities that you will need to complete in order to transition your registration to a license when the MSA comes into force, as well as activities that BCFSA will undertake to support you, such as launching transition education and publishing information and guidance. The roadmap graphic you see here is published on BCFSA's website to serve as a guide for when and what registrants can expect throughout the 3 phases of the transition. And I'm going to get into more detail of each of these phases in the coming slides. Phase 1 of the transition began on July 14 when the BC government approved the rules and regulation for the MSA. This is also when BCFSA completed the first activities as part of the transition plan, which included the publication of information about our approach to the transition, as well as early information about licensing and transition education. Yesterday, September 9, the first transition education course, the MSA Getting Started, launched for all current registrants. You should have received an email from UBC with a link to the registration. For a link to register for the course, and you'll hear more about the course from Caroline later in the session. Today's information session is also part of this phase, to help you learn more about the MSA and what the transition will mean for you. As part of this phase, BCFSA will also be undertaking a brokerage readiness assessment. As its name suggests, the brokerage readiness assessment is intended to help BCFSA determine how prepared mortgage brokerages are for the MSA. The first assessment will allow us to establish a baseline for the mortgage services industry's knowledge, awareness, and understanding of the new regulatory framework. We'll use this information to provided by brokerages to analyze compliance risks, to guide oversight, identify gaps in knowledge and awareness of the MSA, and evaluate the impact of our communication and education activities to help us determine whether more information or resources are needed to support you in advance of the MSA coming into force. The brokerage readiness assessment will be an online survey to be completed by the designated individual of each brokerage. The first assessment will launch on October 1st, 2025, after the MSA Getting Started course is expected to have been completed by the majority of designated individuals. The assessment should take about an hour to complete, and designated individuals will have 2 weeks to complete it. A second readiness assessment will be conducted towards the end of phase 2 of the transition, following the completion of the Principal Broker Education course, which will help us further determine brokerage's readiness ahead of the third phase of the transition beginning. Here you can see a summary of the themes of questions we'll be asking in the brokerage readiness assessment. The questions will focus on brokerage profile and operations, training and knowledge, awareness and understanding, compliance and risk management, and preparedness for the transition. A summary report outlining the results of the assessment will be published on BCFSA's website. Information included in the report will be aggregated and will not include any brokerage-specific or identifying information. Phase 2 is focused on information and education and is the longest phase in the transition. During this phase, we will launch the Mortgage Broker Knowledge Base, an information hub on the BCFSA website that houses regulatory information about the MSA, including regulatory statements and guidelines. I'll get into more detail about this tool in the coming slides. During phase 2, transition education for prospective principal brokers and mortgage broker licensees will also launch. The MSA, the new principal broker course, will launch first, followed by the MSA, the new mortgage broker course. Toward the end of phase 2, after all prospective principal brokers have completed the transition education course, BCFSA will launch the second brokerage readiness assessment. To further support you throughout the MSA transition and following its implementation, we'll be launching a new tool on the BCFSA website. The Mortgage Broker Knowledge Base will help you understand your obligations, navigate the regulatory landscape, and improve your practice under the MSA. It is a resource hub specifically designed for BC's mortgage services industry, providing access to a wide range of information, including regulatory resources, guidelines, disclosure forms, and other tools to help you with your day-to-day business. The tool is being developed based on the Real Estate Knowledge Base, which is a well-used tool for real estate professionals. The Mortgage Broker Knowledge Base will launch on our website early in the fall with regulatory information about education and will continue to be added to throughout the transition and beyond. Regulatory resources will be published throughout the transition period to help you understand your obligations under the new legislation. In fall this year, we'll begin the steady release of regulatory statements, information, and guidelines on various aspects of the MSA. We will also regularly update our website with new information and helpful resources, such as answers to frequently asked questions and scenario-based content. As part of the transition to the MSA, we will also be launching a mortgage broker bulletin blog. The blog will feature articles about topics relevant to the MSA to further guide your learning process throughout the transition. And during the transition, we'll also continue to send updates and information directly to mortgage brokers via electronic newsletters. The existing Mortgage Brokers Update newsletter will continue to be sent on a bi-monthly basis to all registrants, and a new newsletter will be launched in the fall for designated individuals. So let's take a closer look at the rollout schedule for regulatory instruments and information. We'll start by publishing information about licensure in the fall, which will cover topics such as education requirements, licensing requirements, personal mortgage corporations, and errors and omissions insurance. In winter, we'll release information about duties, including those of licensees, for trust accounts, and related to teams. In spring 2026, the focus of information will be on disclosures, including labour mobility. And in summer 2026, we'll share resources about compliance, such as reporting requirements, administrative penalties, and information about privacy, advertising, and guidance. The release schedule of these resources has been developed based on the anticipated need of registrants and to ensure a measured approach of information. Phase 3 is the last phase in the 15-month transition and will take place in the 3 months prior to the MSA coming into force on October 13, 2026. This phase involves a prospective principal broker completing several service requests, including to propose a principal broker and identifying licensing categories for their brokerage. In Phase 3, the new MSA Mortgage Broker Licensing course will launch for those individuals who are not currently working as a mortgage broker but would wish to become licensed. BCFSA will also be undertaking some technical development work to prepare for the IRIS portal for the new regulatory framework. This work will result in some registration renewal blackout periods, and further information will be shared well in advance to provide ample notice for those blackout periods. On October 13, 2026, the Mortgage Services Act and its associated rules and regulation will come into effect, repealing and replacing the Mortgage Brokers Act and marking the end of our 15-month transition. Now I'll hand it over to Caroline to talk more about transition education.
Thanks, Kate. I'm Caroline Allen, Director of Education and Practice Standards. In this section of the presentation, I'll provide you with an overview of the MSA transition education requirements for currently registered mortgage brokers. So here we have a high-level overview of the MSA transition education pathway for those who plan to become principal brokers. This pathway is generally intended for those currently registered as DIs. Step 1 is the MSA Getting Started course. This course is a fully online e-learning module. It's delivered by UBC through its learning management system. And so in completing BCFSA continuing education, such as legal update, you should be familiar with this format. This course provides you with a high-level overview of MSA and should take about 1 to 2 hours to complete. In the course, you'll learn the main differences between the MSA and the MBA, and it includes the following topics: new definitions, the licensing process, licensee obligations, and the enforcement processes. Step 2 is the new Principal Broker Part 1 course. It's currently scheduled to launch in October 2025. This course includes 3 e-learning modules and an optional virtual classroom webinar. The e-learning modules cover license levels and categories, brokerage requirements and responsibilities, and principal broker requirements and responsibilities. After completing the e-learning modules, you will choose when you wish to attend the virtual classroom session from a number of scheduled dates. Step 3 is the new Principal Broker Part 2 course. Launch of this course is planned for launch in late spring 2026. This will be at the same time as the mortgage broker education, which I'll be sharing on the next slide. With this course, intended principal brokers will complete the remaining 2 e-learning modules covering relationships with clients and discipline and enforcement. This element of the transition education is fully online and no virtual classroom sessions are planned for this training. So similar to the previous slide, here we have a high-level overview of the MSA transition education pathways for those who will be licensed as mortgage brokers under the MSA. Step 1 is MSA Getting Started course. As with the principal broker transition, the MSA Getting Started course is the same for mortgage brokers. I'm not going to repeat that information here, although the details are shown on the slide. And as was previously mentioned, we did launch that course yesterday, and mortgage brokers should have received an email from UBC with registration information. Step 2 is the new mortgage broker course. Again, similar to the part 2 of the new principal broker course, this is currently scheduled to launch in the spring of 2026. This course is fully online and consists of 5 e-learning modules that cover topics including license levels and categories, brokerage requirements and responsibilities, principal broker requirements and responsibilities, relationships with clients, and discipline and enforcement. You'll see this slide provides a more in-depth look at the topics that will be covered in the transition education. Overall, content for all currently registered mortgage brokers, DIs, and submortgage brokers consists of the same 6 modules. These modules are designed to take mortgage brokers through the transition, first understanding the MSA, then with the remaining 5 modules, training on the rules and regulations, starting with licensing levels and service categories, then the requirements for brokerages, including brokerage structure, staffing models, brokerage accounting, and supervision, just to highlight a few. After learning about the brokerage requirements, principal broker requirements and responsibilities will be covered. Closer to the in-force date, as we saw in the previous slides, you will learn more about the new regulated requirements for relationships with clients and the new discipline and enforcement regime. As I've shared, we've packaged the content differently for intended principal brokers, individuals currently registered as DIs, and for current sub-mortgage brokers who will be licensed as mortgage brokers after the MSA comes into effect on October 13th, 2026. The timing and sequence of delivery is based on the best educational practices. Teaching someone too far before they need it may result in them not seeing the relevance to current practice or them forgetting the requirements and having to relearn them. For example, the difference in course structure for principal brokers and mortgage brokers was devised to account for many considerations that those intending on being licensed as principal brokers need to make in advance of in-force date. The decision to deliver the MSA, the Principal Broker Part 1 course early, allows DIs and brokerages sufficient time to understand the impacts of the new legislation, consider how they may need to adapt to align with the MSA requirements so they may continue to operate after October 13th, 2026, and make any necessary changes to corporate and brokerage structures to ensure a smooth transition to licensing under MSA. This is why shortly after the MSA Getting Started course is launched, the MSA, the new Principal Broker Part 1 will launch. So before I close, I'd like to share some important takeaways. The total cost of transition education is $175. On the previous two slides, you saw how that fee is broken down for the various components of the training. Training is mandatory. You'll need to complete one course before moving to the next. BCFSA encourages you to complete these courses early so you have time to understand the impacts of the new requirements. The education must be completed before October 13th, 2026 to transition registration to a license. To support a smooth transition, we will continually monitor completion and follow up with registrants as necessary. So here are your next steps. Take the MSA Getting Started course. As we noted, it was launched yesterday, September 9th. You all should have received an email from UBC with information about how to register for the course. In that message, you'll find instructions about signing into your UBC Real Estate Division student account using your student ID number, and that ID number is provided in the email from UBC. Once you've logged in, you'll have access to a specially designed registration portal that will take you through the process of registering. As completion of this course is a prerequisite to the Principal Broker and Mortgage Broker Transition Education courses, we will take all measures to encourage early completion of the MSA Getting Started course. So information about the MSA Transition Education is also provided on BCFSA's website, and we will keep that updated. Please continue also to watch for information from BCFSA and UBC Real Estate Division about the courses. And thank you, and I'll pass it back now.
Back to me.
Yeah, to Jessica, thanks.
Thanks, Caroline. And so I'd like to thank everybody who submitted questions through the registration form. We received many questions. I'm going to try to go through a couple of the key questions. A couple of things to note. This recording is going to be made available on our website. And I just wanted to clarify that the first information session today and the second information session that we are offering next week are going to be the exact same. Our platform can manage a maximum of 1,000 participants, and we're at about 750 individuals who are participating today. And so we split that out to maximize the number of people who could attend virtually if they wish. So I will go through a couple of the frequently asked questions, and we will be also updating our FAQs on our website and responding to some of the questions that we're getting in the chat on our website through the FAQs moving forward. But so the first one is, what do I need to do to get ready for transition? So there are a couple of different things you might need to do, and that depends on whether it depends on who you are. Whether you are a mortgage broker, or whether you're an individual who wishes to become a principal broker, a sole proprietor, or a person who might want to establish a personal mortgage corporation. Regardless of who you are, the starting point for everyone is education. So everyone who wishes to have their registration transition to a license, including all currently registered sub-mortgage brokers, must complete the required transition education courses before the enforced date. So you will be notified once registration is is open to you. To make sure that you're receiving notifications, you need to make sure that that your contact details that BCFSA has for you from IRIS are current and up to date. So if you've not received those notifications, I would encourage you to log on to IRIS and update your contact information. You should also be keeping your eyes peeled for BCFSA newsletters and updates to the website and to the knowledge base. The knowledge base is really going to be your portal for resources and information that will help you understand and apply the new requirements once they come into force. We're going to be posting information to the knowledge base on an ongoing and regular basis. So it's not all just going to come at once. It is going to come in bite-sized chunks so that you can take away and consider all of the new information that's being posted. We'll also share key dates and milestones with you throughout the transition through our newsletters and our blog, and as Kate went through. So next question, how do I transition my registration to the new licensing categories? And so we are going to be providing far more detailed information about transition and the transition process much closer to the enforced date. But just in the interest of ensuring that you have information about and an understanding of the steps and the processes that are going to proceed or lead up to the transition, I can offer an overview of the process that will hopefully help to address some of your questions about what you need to do and when you need to do it. So approximately 3 to 4 months prior to the enforced date, there's going to be a service request from IRIS that's going to go out to mortgage brokerages, and they are going to be responsible for proposing a principal broker. So this might be the current designated individual, but it could also be a different individual who has completed the principal broker transition education and meets the principal broker requirements. BCFSA will assess each of the proposed principal brokers to ensure that the individual meets suitability requirements. Once the principal broker is approved, that person will then receive a second service request, and they will be responsible for selecting the categories of licensing for the brokerage. So the individuals who are the individual mortgage brokers who are licensed in relation to that brokerage don't have to do anything. They are going to inherit the categories of the brokerage on transition. A mortgage broker, it is important to note, though, that a mortgage broker can't be licensed in a category if the brokerage and the principal broker are also not licensed in that category. There are no fees that are going to be charged for the transition of a registration to a license, and there aren't going to be any changes to the term of your license or to the renewal date. All licensees will still be required to renew their license every 2 years. However, there may be fees charged for new registrations. So for example, a personal mortgage corporation is a new regulatory construct. So if you wish to establish a PMC, and that the ability to apply for a PMC will be made available following enforced date, the fee schedule for a personal mortgage corporation will apply on application. So next question, can I be licensed in more than one category? So the answer is yes. Under the MSA, a mortgage broker can be licensed in more than one category, such as dealing, trading, administering, or lending, as long as their brokerage is also licensed in those categories. These categories define the types of mortgage services a licensee can provide, and then the individual brokers are going to inherit the categories that are selected by their approved principal broker during the transition. So while multiple category licensing is permitted, it's dependent also on the brokerage's licensing choices. So the base licensing fee includes one category of service, and each additional category will include a fee. So it's important that the categories that you select align with the services that you are providing. The category fees are really intended to ensure that mortgage brokers select categories that are that accurately reflect the services that they're providing, so that BCFSA as the regulator can then target specific policy and continuing education that are based on those categories of service. After you've completed the education, you'll need to think carefully about the services that you're offering at your brokerages and select the categories based on those services. Thoughtful and deliberate selection of categories will help to streamline the transition for you, but also for all the individual mortgage brokers at your brokerage. So last question that we can answer today, and again, we will pick up some of the questions that we are seeing in the chat and make sure that we provide all of the information in response to those questions on our website. But do I need a separate license if I'm a mortgage broker getting paid through a corporation? And so in all circumstances, the answer is yes. If you are a licensed mortgage broker or a principal broker and you are receiving remuneration through a corporation, that corporation must also be licensed. So to clarify, you'll need 2 licenses, one for yourself and one for the corporation, which is called in future state a personal mortgage corporation. The key requirements for personal mortgage corporations can be found in Part 6 under the Mortgage Services Regulation. And there are also requirements for PMCs under the rules in the MSA. We strongly recommend that before you take steps to incorporate and license a PMC, you get the necessary professional accounting and legal advice to make sure that a PMC is the right choice for you. And more guidance on this topic is forthcoming in the fall of this year. So with that, we will take away some of the questions that we are seeing. We will provide more information to ensure that you have all of the information and resources that you need. And I will turn it back to Kayla, who will walk us through to close some of the support and resources that will be available to you after this presentation and throughout the duration of the transition period.
Thank you, Jessica, Kate, and Caroline, for explaining all of that to us. I know that was a lot of information to share. Next slide, please. While we are transitioning from the NBA to the MSA, we are here to help. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out to us. We have a lot of resources available on our website, and we have a dedicated MSA practice standards advisor, Todd Healy, who is available to assist with all your inquiries. All questions can be sent directly to msa@bcfsa.ca, by phone to the new BCFSA Service Center at 604-660-3555, or toll free at 866-206-3030. Please note that our service center is closed tomorrow, but will reopen on Friday. Also, the knowledge base, our information and resource hub, will launch this fall, so stay tuned for that. Next slide, please. Thank you for joining us today. The recording of this session will be available on BCFSA's MSA webpage shortly, so please feel free to watch it again or pass it on to anyone who may have missed this session. Next week's session on September 17th will be the exact same, so feel free to join us if you would like to walk through this again. And if you've come to this one, you don't have to come on September 17th. Once again, thank you for joining us and have a wonderful day, everyone.